Hello and welcome back to the Shreve Crump and Low YouTube channel. I'm your host Jack Tyler, and today I'm going to be sharing with you an extremely special Patek 5205R 001 with a Tiffany dial that has just arrived here in our watch salon for sale. When I first saw this watch in the case at Shreve, I was immediately drawn to it for a few reasons. One, I've always adored the 5205, and especially in the rose gold configuration. Two, the outstanding condition of this piece itself, and lastly, that infamous and so rare Tiffany stamp on the dial. Now this brings me to my first question for you all, which is, does that tiny line of extra text known as a double stamp dial even matter to you? Leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. Personally, I have to admit that the stamped dials are a bit of a guilty pleasure. If watches are indulgence, just like something, let's say ice cream, then to me the 5205 is like an ice cream sundae, and that Tiffany stamp, the sprinkles on top. It's just something a little extra special that makes the watch even more unique. Now for those of you who are watching this video and are scratching your head asking what is a double stamp dial, I'm going to give you a little bit of a history lesson. Retailers such as ourselves here at Shreve and many others like Tiffany Co, Bayer, and Cartier have offered stamp dials on rare occasions. These are partnerships between the brands that were more commonly seen in the past. However, they do still do them on very rare occasions, such as this one. These historic watches often fetch spectacular prices at auction whenever they appear. Patek has had a strong relationship with Tiffany throughout their histories, and due to how important both of these brands are, you can only imagine the premium that people are willing to pay to see both those names on one watch. Now with this one added line of text comes an extreme difference in price. A normal non-double stamped 5205R goes for roughly $15,000 less than the watch that we have here today. Naturally, we have to ask ourselves the question, is it really worth that big of a difference in price? And that question, while obvious to some, is not so obvious to others. For some, the idea of paying $15,000 more for such a small detail is quite frankly ridiculous. And if that's how you feel, I totally get that. But when we take a step back and look at it from a slightly different lens, as watch collectors, it's all that we value, the small stuff. We scrutinize every last detail of these relatively tiny objects to begin with, and I've noticed that the longer someone collects, the more they start to focus on these details that really make the watch more special, more unique, and harder to get. Okay, let's take a break from the psychology and jump into the general details about this watch. We have a 40mm case constructed out of 18 karat rose gold. The shape of the 5205R is really a work of art in my opinion. As you look around the case, you'll notice the beautiful sweeping curves all throughout the design. But the feature that really stands out to me are those beautifully hollowed out lugs that add just so much character to this watch. If you imagined them with the normal solid lugs, it would not have that architectural impact. Now the lug spacing is a classic 20mm, which is great because if you're like me, you can change the strap really easy. There's a lot of options in that size. It's one of the more popular sizes for aftermarket straps, and this watch is going to look so great on so many different straps. It's like you're owning multiple different ones. Another amazing feature of this watch that really sets it apart is the fact that it has a concave bezel. Most of the bezels that you see on watches are going to be convex. They roll up to the outer edges of the crystal, but in this case, it almost creates this effect where it feels like it's melting away. It's just very, very, very smooth and beautiful application of this technique, which you don't see on a lot of other pieces. Now let's move on to the complications of this watch. We see that radial annual calendar display that has now become iconic to Patek. Obviously, the annual calendar shows the date, the day, the month, and the moon phase, and this is actually a complication that Patek conceived all the way back in 1996. We also see the AM/PM indicator surrounding the moon phase display. Powering these complications is the caliber 324S, which is a handsomely decorated automatic winding movement which supplies a healthy 45 hours of power reserve on a full wind. Looking to the details of this white, almost opaline colored dial, we have rose gold accents decorating the hours, minutes, and hands. Each one of these details is hand polished and applied to the dial by hand. It's super easy to just get lost in this dial, gazing at all the little details that are snuck into this watch. Alright, I'm gonna go ahead and throw it on the wrist so you can get a better idea how this watch wears. You'll notice the sloping profile of the bezel and case really wrap nicely around my 6.5-inch wrist. In my opinion, this watch could be worn on a wrist, maybe even as small as 5.5 to 6 inches, which is great because as someone who is constantly looking for smaller watches, there's not a lot of them out there, and the Patek absolutely nails it. This watch pairs well with a suit, but also looks at home with a preppy casual look as well. There's a ton of different ways that you can style this watch, but my favorites happen to be with a nice cardigan and a well-fitting pair of jeans. In my mind, the 5205 represents one of Patek's purest watches. A watch that hasn't been overly hyped to death on Instagram, and one that really checks just about every box when you're thinking about a classic Patek. It's an annual calendar, it's super classical, and timeless design is crafted out of 18 karat gold, which is my favorite from Patek. These are historically things that have made Patek truly special throughout their timeline, and it's great to see Patek still doing it and doing it better than anyone else. As always, thanks so much for tuning in. If you're a fan of the channel, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Leave us a comment below. What do you think about this watch or Patek in general? And we hope to catch you on the next video. Thanks for spending a little time with us today.